And so people who join us afterwards will find that they are not being locked out. But my name is Hap Aziz. It is now, according to my clock, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the time for the start of the webinar, which is, if you're on the computer screen, you should see every library should have their own CASA App Store. Share your mobile and LTI apps, and we'll talk about what that means. And I'm the facilitator for the Connected Learning Innovation Community with IMS Global. That has to do with learning technologies, interoperability apps, LTI apps, and we will be talking about CASA and what that means as well. And along with me are Eric and Rose from UCLA. I will have them introduce themselves in just a moment, but I did want to mention that you see you should see, if you're on the screen, a URL there for imsglobal.org/CASA. I encourage you to visit that, but also from the IMS Global site, you will be able to learn about the Connected Learning Innovation Community, which is what this is involved with, which is all about LTI conformant apps. And that is education apps that can be easily shared, loaded within a mobile or LMS environment. And the CASA App Store is all about creating one such environment. And so I'm going to hand it over to Eric and Rose right now, and they will introduce themselves and jump right on in. Thank you.
Thank you, Hap. So this is Rose Rocchio from UCLA, and I've been working with IMS Global on the CASA project for about 18 months, a little more maybe. And we're really excited to have folks on the line to learn more about what we've been up to and how they can get involved and participate. And I'd also like to have Eric Bollins, who's our lead architect on the project, introduce himself.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Eric Bollins. I'm an open source architect here at UCLA. And CASA, I've been involved with CASA kind of as technical lead for pretty much the full duration so far.
Yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do is talk through the impetus of the whole CASA concept, and then we'll go through some use cases that organically got us to the point we are today and the partnership with IMS in this effort, and then we'll do a live demo, technology permitting, and always the most dangerous words, but in any presentation. But anyway, so let's see. I have the presentation skills here, so I believe I can go to the next slide. So let's see. That would be
Rose, if you just click at the top to the left of, you'll see CASA IMS.
Second tab, third tab.
Ah, there we go. Okay. Okay, I was trying to find the presentation. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we've already introduced ourselves, and if everybody can see the screen, I have to remember that there's the delay involved in the WebEx scenario. And what we have done is remove any of the previous animation, so hopefully this should go quite smoothly. Okay, so just a little bit about what CASA is all about. There's the consumerization of IT movement has really been driven by the mobile phone sort of app store environment where people can go and see ratings on apps and test them out, try them out, whether they be free or paid for, what have you. So app mania has been something we've been all experiencing from the smartphone sort of world. And what has been apparent is that everybody sort of knows how to go, not everybody, but almost everybody knows how to go and get apps. And there's a lot of them. So in a scenario of, back to app mania. In a scenario of thinking about what does that mean for us, really it means that the education sector has played a big part in this as well. And I think I had some earlier data that said roughly 7% of these apps were education focused. And the problem is now curating that, because how does one know if it's going to fit what they're trying to teach their students, whether or not it's something that has been used at what level of education. So just this broad category of education is not enough for what our instructors need in formulating their courses to be really effective and engaging for their students. So something to consider is that really, in a sense, how do we sort through the content that's also available web-based and web-friendly and mobile device-based as well. So we said, okay, what is an app? Let's unpack that a little bit. It's content, and there's, a world of an internet out there with all the content, but not easily curated or found necessarily. There's functionality in an app that allows people to do different things that feel really easy for them today, like adding something to your calendar or finding a way to put up reminders and what have you. There's surveys and interactivity and other types of actions that happen in apps today that are, engaging, interesting, field work for students, things like that. But again, the realm of what an app is does not have to be native. It also includes everything that's web-based. So what we started to realize was thinking about where can we take things in the education sector in a way that will be more consumable for instructors who are looking for specifics. And so these are some numbers here from last year's educational market statistics on educational apps. And the reality of it is that our instructors and our students and the whole education market really is using, are partaking in this activity with 4 billion downloads, 4+ billion downloads going on. But the scenario of how does the institution, whether it be a 4-year, school, or whether it be something, K-12 environment, the reality of it is that we don't have currently a way to do the curation and help our instructors identify what they would most like to use and find it in a quick fashion. So that's one of the scenarios for driving us towards this effort. Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the fact that there's a new discussion point in Gartner's 2014 Hype Cycle for Education called Exostructure. And what that's getting at is the idea of wanting to be able to leverage what the market and the vendors and the whole ecosystem of education is bringing forth and getting that to be easily interoperable with what our instructors want to deliver in a quick and easy way. And so, as you can see, it's really at the what they call embryonic stage of the hype cycle. It's new, but it is something that will take some planning and thinking about to get us in a place where we can leverage it by the time it reaches its productivity phase. So this I just wanted to identify. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what Exostructure is. So really, it's referred to as a strategy, and it's this idea of leveraging interoperability to allow the educational institutions to leverage the power of the market in the education space in a quick way so that it will be relevant and interesting, as well as sort of seamless to the consumer, which is, for us, the student for the most part. So let's see. Next slide really talks about the enablers, and it calls out, amongst other things, but mostly referring to the standards that IMS Global has been working through. And CASA is not listed there yet, although I hope next year we'll hopefully be on that list. But the interesting part here is that vendors and those who invest in infrastructure and as well as applications and tools that they feel will be leverageable for education are all seeing the value of this strategy and working together with institutions to making this a reality where things can be interoperable without massive investment on a one-off customized basis. So just to sort of wrap that into the focus, just really understanding that what we're talking about is an ecosystem where leveraging others' competitive differentiators allows the institution to focus on the teaching aspect. And so let's see, I'm going to bring up what Hap was referring to as IMS Global's connected learning vision. And so the idea is that not only is LTI important, which allows these tools to interoperate, but giving the instructors themselves the ability to discover what is right now an interesting version of how somebody could experience or learn a concept better, getting that at the fingertips of the people who are doing the instruction is really important. And that's where CASA fits in and helps institutions curate, thinking of their own audiences in mind, but also with the idea that we can, when somebody's invented something or created a website that's leverageable, it has more applicability in the field, and probably it has more power if you think about the idea of sharing it across the field, because these fields sometimes are small. Like, we have a Scandinavian department at UCLA, and they are working on resources and combining and aggregating things, but really their most sort of avid peers are the other Scandinavian departments across the world, and there are not that many of them, and they should be better connected, but it's really rather hard to do in today's world. But so hopefully the idea of CASA is to allow people to come up with ways to get these communities of affinity to interact more and share more of their sort of focused research and work with one another. So that's where CASA sits in the infrastructure vision of IMS, and let's see. So I'm going to pass it over to Eric, and he is going to do a few slides and then a demo.
All right.
Here we go. I got to go to Eric and make presenter.
All right. So briefly, I'd like to talk about how we got to this point, kind of to go from this, in the kind of 10,000-foot view and actually dive into how we got to where we are and what exactly CASA is. So where this all started for us is that we were actually part of the mobile team for UCLA. We were trying to figure out how we could end up with a rich and thriving environment of mobile apps showing up on a dashboard that we were presenting to our users. And we built out a lot of stuff here at UCLA, but we wanted to see if we could get apps from other campuses as well. And we were collaborating with a lot of the other UCs. And so it was like, all right, well, what apps do you have? And so not every app that they had was campus-specific. Rose mentioned the Scandinavian Dictionary. We had a glossary of organic chemistry. There were a bunch of other things, too, that our students might find useful. So one way we could do it is we could simply pick up the phone and we could call the mobile people we knew on the other campuses and be like, hey, what apps do you have? But as you start scaling out, that becomes incredibly inefficient. It's basically n plus n minus 1, it's some ridiculous number. It's n squared minus 1 divided by 2 or something like that, is the total number of connections you have to establish to have what is called a full mesh network. So we had to come up with an alternate strategy so we didn't have to contact every single person at every single campus, find out what they had. Another approach we could have gone with was more of a hub and spoke model. A hub and spoke model would mean that there's some central aggregator that we all agree is the source of information about apps. So a central aggregator is somebody like Apple or Google. They maintain one app store that has all the apps that everybody, regardless of their institution, goes to. And this works well in some contexts, but when you start thinking about education, it doesn't work as well. We want to make sure that the apps that our students are getting, that they're, when they go to the App Store, the apps that they're actually offered as campus apps are apps that we have curated and vetted and are a part of the ecosystem that we want them to find. So this model really relies on that hub having like the same trust understanding as everybody else does, the same curation rules, and we don't really want that. So another approach, and the approach that we ended up taking with CASA, is that app sharing happens in a peer-to-peer model, a model where each institution says, I trust these people, and I want to receive apps from them. And additionally, I'm willing to receive apps that they've received from others, that they too, that they've shared with their students. I'm willing to also take those as though they are the apps of, as their apps themselves. So that was the model we went with. And for those familiar with network design, this is a peer-to-peer model as opposed to hub and spoke or full mesh. As far as the architecture goes, the topology is flexible. We can model the real-world relationships with CASA that we already have with other institutions. This means that, I can affiliate with the other UC schools. I can affiliate with other institutions that I've worked with in one way or another whose trust model I'm willing to buy into. And it propagates out through this network. Another aspect of the architecture is that it's asymmetric. So let's say the UCLA library wants to publish to all the other UCs. They could go ahead and stand up an instance of the store that shares with our central UCLA instance and then shares beyond that. And we don't have to have relationships where it's like we share everything with them, they share everything with us. They can just push up to us as well. And the topology here is really all about creating a web of trust where, you know, I only have to make decisions. I trust these people around me, and the apps that they're sending me are all things I'm willing to receive, and then I can make decisions based on it. This comes down to kind of our second key point in our architecture, which is about propagation. So when we receive apps from any of our direct peers, we can define all sorts of rules about how we're willing to interpret these apps. You know, I can look at the attributes and say, I meet the qualifications for this app based on the attributes that it sent me about Shibboleth. You know, it's in common federated, so my students will be able to take advantage of it. I could also choose, no, this app has content in it that's marked as explicit, so I'm not willing to put this in my store. So I can make all sorts of local decisions based on the information I receive. And what this ends up doing is allowing me to create an app store that is tailored specifically to my students, my faculty, my staff, but that has apps that have been received from others that meet the qualifications, basically, that I'm willing to share. So let's talk a little bit about two core use cases regarding CASA. The first is the mobile dashboard, the use case that kind of motivated the initial work. But then we'll dive into the LTI tool store, basically, which is a second use case for CASA that works just as well and is what we've basically embarked on here with IMS and expanded this initiative to encompass. So to start with the mobile dashboard, let me offer a little bit of a story. So we have a set of apps at UCLA that we allow our users access to. This screenshot is the old m.ucla.edu site. We wanted to give the users control, though, as the number of apps we had grew. So we had some that made sense that were kind of campus general. But then we had all these others. You know, the psychology department put out an app. Our business school put out an app. We had the Scandinavian dictionary, the glossary of chemistry, whatever else. So we needed to allow them to personalize. So the first step we did was we said, okay, cool. We'll let them say, I want to show these apps on my dashboard, and I don't want to show those apps on my dashboard. But that still only allows us to basically give them a list and kind of check the boxes for this or not for that. And so with CASA, this whole thing changes. We can borrow from the model that we see Apple and Google using with their stores, and we can actually create basically a store of apps that people can add. So let me see if I can figure out how to share my desktop now. Lisa, any?
Eric, go up to share on the top menu and then go to my desktop.
Ah, perfect. Is anything showing up?
Not yet. Give it a second.
There we go. Okay, cool.
There we go.
So this is a unstyled but still a mobile dashboard, and this is a mobile dashboard that's connected to CASA. So let's go ahead and find an app that we're interested in adding. So with CASA, it's as easy as I can go to Add Apps, and I get a little storefront, and I could, you know, run a search or browse by categories or do whatever. But for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to go ahead and select a tool that I'd like to add to my mobile dashboard. Go ahead in here, and I can say Add, and that's all it takes. And now that tool is on my dashboard, and of course we have modeled the same sort of pattern as you see anywhere else. You can rearrange stuff and do whatever else you want with it. But so that's the way the store works. But now we talked about CASA being a network, and really this is kind of the key differentiator, is being able to curate my own network. So I'm going to come over to this administrative tool I've got up on the other screen, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how easy it is to peer up with somebody else and actually get started sharing their apps. So right now, Exostructure is actually running a CASA engine, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to peer up with it and get all of the apps from them. So CASA in raw protocol form looks something like this. It's just a whole bunch of messy data. It's just a JSON dump. But what it has inside of it is all the information we need when we go for our engine to interpret, for our CASA engine to interpret and start sharing these apps. So let me go ahead and actually add this peer in. So I'm going to go over to peers, add a new inbound peer, use that URL, go ahead and set them up as a peer, create it. And now, in the background right now, our CASA engine is sending a query out to their CASA endpoint and saying, hey, what apps do you have that you're willing to share with me? We're receiving it. From here, we are now making our own local decisions about it. So I'm saying I'm willing to take these apps, I'm not willing to take those apps. I can also change properties of the application. But let's go ahead now and see what we've received. So I can now look at my set of apps, and I have a whole new set of apps that came from CASA. They're disabled right now, but I could go in and just really easily say enabled and make them available to my faculty, my staff, and my students through the UCLA App Store, so to speak. And that's pretty much a really, really brief demo of how CASA works. Now, what I should also say here is that this implementation I'm running, this CASA on Rails, this is one of several implementations of CASA that exist. CASA on Rails is a really lightweight resource. You can pull it down. It's just a standard Ruby on Rails app that speaks CASA. It can communicate with any other CASA engine, receive apps, and provide an app store, a mobile outlet, connect with your learning management system, whatever else you need. But we also have a reference implementation that is the full scope of the protocol, basically. It's a much more complex application to install, but it serves as a really good model if you're trying to understand how to do any process in the protocol. And a third implementation in the wild is what EDU App Center is providing, which is basically they have their own store and they have simply put a CASA publisher endpoint in front of it. And so it makes it easy enough for anybody using CASA to just connect and pull down all the apps that have said they want to be shared via CASA. So those are kind of the three ways it works. And with that, let me go ahead and hand it back over to Rose, who's going to talk about now how this fits into the learning management space just as easily as it does into the mobile space.
Okay.
So let me just get you the slides back.
I think I'm there.
There you go.
Okay, great. I'm now the presenter. Sure. Excellent. Thank you, Eric. Okay, so we've gone through the mobile dash case and mobile dashboard case, and now we're going to talk about finding an LTI app and how that parlays into leveraging CASA as well. So the idea, and we have not yet implemented it to a great deal, but it is in the works to consider the ratings and allowing those ratings to then be available as part of CASA. But the idea is to give people the concept of filtering within a selected set of apps. So, and how it works today, I just wanted to go through a little bit about this. I mean, I'm just going to talk about an LMS experience with what the LMS that we use at UCLA, which is Moodle. But effectively, people go and they can add an activity or a resource just by clicking something in there when they have their course editing environment open. Then they can select a tool. But unless that tool has a specific plugin created, they need to go and pick something called external tool, the way it works today. And then once they do that, they can go in here into the details of launching in using LTI. But it's a bit too much for a lot of our faculty. And so what we wanted to do is create this environment so it would be much more simple for those. And what I have is another LMS that's implemented the LTI message item content type, and or I think it's content item type, but
content item message
content
type.
Item message type. Okay. It's a piece of LTI that is newer, but allows this to happen. And so this is a demo that we did at the Learning Impact Conference last May, where we launched a course out of Blackboard, and then we went into the environment to add a tool. And then it looked like that, where we said, okay, we're going to open something, because CASA in this instance itself is an LTI tool that can, once it can be launched, it would be, let's see, where's the next slide? There we go. It's the same sort of environment. It's the same store that you saw on Eric's side working live, but effectively this we call it an outlet, really, but this instance of the display then shows the LMS-ready version of your CASA and allows you to, let's say, add a tool. Again, you click that Add App, and then it's in your course. So the idea of simplifying this was really sort of hit a note between both the mobile use case and the LMS use case, and we also feel like this is completely something people would like to use across a lot of different websites as well, because really all that we're doing is giving people that same friendly environment of adding something that they want to use, and whether it be temporarily or longer term, it doesn't really matter, because as long as it's under the user's control. So it really works for any dashboard in the higher ed space. So we just wanted to go over the things we feel are value add of CASA. It enables curation of apps, LTI tools, and gives, and really anything, a web-based resource, really, because the difference here from some people say, well, why would you do this? You know, Apple and Google work fine, and the reality of it is that really this is a web-based implementation with the idea of a network behind it. So it enables the efficient sharing of apps across the system. We have some apps that at the UC system are system-wide, and you know, the reality of it is every single mobile implementation that's web-based, or whether or not you could put it into a native environment as well. But the idea being that you want to be able to share the same series of things and not have to reinvent the wheel. And so allowing that to happen more easily, also a value add. We also know that for libraries, and I know the sort of title of our whole presentation was about libraries, but we really want to emphasize that the digital collections that a lot of our university libraries have are really unique and special, and as they're, you know, being digitized in a sort of flurry of activity, how do we share them more effectively and in a way that's going to allow our instructors really easy access to put their materials and their launches into their course with a certain amount of you know, friendliness and familiarity. So we think CASA is a really neat way for that to happen with a small amount of clicks, with 3 clicks really, as we've shown. And so again, another environment we think is going to be very context-specific is as the simulations and games around education starts to flourish, we're going to see more of these sort of in-depth, really deep dive environments arise, and making it easier for people to share, for example, within and amongst business schools, case studies and simulation games and things like that that really help the students experience and make memories, make decisions, take risks, and make a sort of a place that's in quote-unquote safe to fail, make that more available for students. And we think that's an exciting new world for education, and we want to enable the sharing of that, all of that work. Because I don't think any of us can really look at that and say that we're going to do that on our own. But that in a shared environment, we think, well, that could be really neat. So anyway, let's see. Next, we want to just think about the action items. And do you want to just talk to these guys? You can just talk to these.
Yes, let me talk to these real quickly. So one thing we need to do as we move forward from the LMS use case is that we need to add we basically need all the LMSs to come on board supporting the LTI content item message type. The reason I say this is this is already an IMS standard, and it makes it very easy for us to then add CASA into any learning management system where they can simply launch it as an LTI tool, launch CASA as an LTI tool, and then CASA can communicate back to the learning management system and say, please add this other tool now that the user's picked it through the storefront. An alternate approach would be that we could actually, in each LMS could actually add something that directly speaks the CASA protocol. But that's not as scalable and not as reasonable. So one thing we'd like to do from the IMS side is get this support in all the LMSs. As far as the community goes, we've got kind of 3 key action items there. One is we really need to flesh out flesh out our community itself, build out a roadmap for them, and decide where our priorities lie. And really along those lines, what are the attributes that we want to be conveying? Right now, when a CASA engine communicates with another CASA engine, it receives stuff that we know is pretty common. You know, what categories have you put this app in? What are some tags of relevant information about it? What's its description, its authors, its organization? Does it have explicit content in it? But what we haven't developed yet right now are a slew of other things we should be including, like what shibboleth attributes does it need, if any? What's the payment model, if any? And many, many other things along those lines. What are user ratings of it, and things like that. So a whole bunch of attributes that we need to develop out, and we're looking for the community to help us do that. The other thing, of course, is that we actually want to start seeing some CASAs stand up, so that rather than the demo that I just did where I connected with Instructure, I can connect with, you know, this higher ed X and higher ed Y, and start pulling in the apps that they're actually producing on their campuses, as well as, you know, the CASAs that are certainly going to be stood up by many of the vendors as we move forward. So those are some of the ongoing tasks for the community, and then maybe to the last item. And then as for getting involved, you know, one of the easiest ways to kind of get involved is to join the IMS Global mailing list. We'll put up a link in a minute for where you can go. It was also up earlier. You know, designate someone from your team to get involved with forming the CASA community. You know, we're going to have a call, a scheduled call that's going to happen every, is it 2 weeks?
Yes.
Yes,
It's every 2 weeks.
And so there's where we'll really discuss a lot of the attribute stuff. We'll discuss some, you know, some improvements on clarity, some end user documentation to make things easier. Of course, you can also hook up your existing app store via the CASA protocol. We'll put up the link for that as well in a minute. Or you can fire up your own CASA engine using one of the reference implementations that we've already produced. You can also just do something as simple as, you know, read the protocol and give us some feedback. You can help us develop some attributes, and you can also share how you implemented CASA, because not everybody has to use one of these reference implementations. Instructure, for example, they sent a quick little gist of just how easy it was for them to lay CASA into their existing app store. So there are a whole bunch of different options for getting involved, and with that, here are a couple links that may be useful. The first being where you can join the mailing list, and the second being the current draft protocol link. I will say that we're going to be making a couple changes, non-breaking. They'll all be backwards compatible, but basically to simplify the protocol. There are a few things in there right now that as we've gone about doing a couple reference implementations, we realized that maybe we had overcomplicated the problem a little bit in a few places. So we're going to be cleaning that up a little bit, making it easier to get started with CASA. And with that, I'd like to say, you know, thank you for your time, and then hand it back over to, I think, Hap. Were you going to kind of wrap up the agenda-ified part, and then we would open it for questions? That kind of the...
Who shall I pass it back? Hap or Lisa?
Yes, I'm here, right here.
Okay.
So, yes, thank you for having the links up. One other link that I'll give you that will give you a little bit of broader information on the whole learning tools interoperability, the LTI Apps piece, is the same imsglobal.org domain, and then /leading change. And what that will allow you to do is it will take you to an area that talks about the connected learning innovation community and what we're trying to do in terms of encouraging institutions, software providers, vendors, how we're encouraging them to create LTI conformant apps. And those are the apps that will live in the CASA environments. And one thing I do want to mention is yearly we put on an app challenge. Earlier this year we had some winners from an app challenge that was opened up last year. This year we have an app challenge. Again, you can learn about it on the IMS Global website. This year's app challenge is focused on higher ed institutions that are creating LTI conformant apps. The deadline for that is December 12th. You can get more information on the website. Winners will be announced early next year, but I encourage those in the higher ed community, specifically for this iteration of the app challenge, to take a look at that, especially if you're doing work now and you feel like you want to submit. So what I want to do now is open up the floor for questions. Lisa, I'm not sure what the question protocol will be. I don't see on my on the WebEx a text entry area. So I don't know if people are going to vocalize their questions or how that will work, Lisa.
Yes, they should vocalize their questions. You'll just need to unmute yourself via the WebEx. It's a red button on the right-hand side of the participant list.
Do you want them to use the raise hand requester, or go ahead and assume that we'll be all very much taking turns?
I'm going to assume we're all going to take turns.
Very good. Well, with that, let's open it up to questions. There's a lot of material here to digest and a lot of good topics to chew on. So questions, please. Well, I'm going to throw out a simple question to start. So we were talking very early on about topologies, and we were talking about a framework that would allow institutions to create their own app stores, and then the way the institutions were comfortable with each other, that's how the app store framework, communication framework could work. Now, how would I go about setting something up and then engaging in a CASA community if I'm not already aware of other institutions that are working on their own stores?
So this is the problem of, this is kind of the problem of bootstrapping, and it exists in any peer-to-peer network. The upfront answer to that is that, you know, we're going to have a few instances of CASA that exist that are easy to tie into, something like one maintained by IMS Global, for example, of LTI approved tools that have actually been certified. In addition, you know, there'll probably be some campuses and stuff that say, yeah, sure, my CASA engine is sharing publicly to the world, and so somewhere we'll maintain a list of those and, you know, sort of the getting started documentation. In addition, though, you know, the best way to get the most relevant tooling for your institution would be to reach out to the other folks at other institutions that you have relationships with in one way or another. For example, a network of business schools. You know, it's easy to reach out to the other business schools and say, hey, you know, are you guys using this CASA thing? If not, maybe you should get on board with it. If so, can we connect with you? Because we really do want to see you know, subgraphs develop in this network of, you know, around certain affinities. But yeah, bootstrapping is a problem. We didn't build it into the protocol itself because that's just adding another layer of complexity. That's not to say we couldn't build an additional thing that helps you do discovery. But at the same time, it's fairly easy to maintain a directory somewhere of publicly sharing ones that don't require any secret keys or anything to start getting apps from, like IMSs. And Instructures is another good example of that.
Sure, and you said something that was interesting in your example of the business school app. So then it's entirely possible to have CASA frameworks that are built around subject matter rather than particular institution.
Yes, yes it is. And in fact, you're probably going to see CASA instances that are a hybrid of both. Somebody like the Anderson Business School here at UCLA might choose to stand up their own CASA engine, and then they might peer both with UCLA main campus and receive everything that we're sharing with our community, as well as peer with a number of business schools that are sharing other business-oriented apps. So they might end up presenting to their users a mesh of both kind of, here are the UCLA apps and here are the business school apps. And so they have the ability to configure their network in that sort of way. And that was what I was alluding to with the when I said that CASA can be asymmetric.
Yeah. One thing, just to put an instance, I mean, when I attended business school, we had some community, it was a challenge for charity, and it was actually something that was really it was a fundraising effort, it was sort of a peering competition, and what we really had was something like, I think it was 6 or 7 different business schools that got together and did this sort of whole challenge. I could envision that somebody would put this app in place. And by the way, apps can be shared individually or have their own sharing protocol, effectively. So you get to decide whether this app should propagate and how far it should propagate. So if I have something that's really just let's say an internal app for the UC, then I would just, you know, have it propagate one level or just really propagate to a certain limit. But if I have something that is for a larger community, I would put sort of mechanism in place to allow that to propagate as far as anybody would want to have a look at that. So the idea of these communities being better supported by this environment is really what we've been sort of targeting. Does that make sense?
It does from my perspective, and it raises an interesting question, more of a procedural question than a technology question, but do you have any recommendations regarding vetting apps? Supposing, in my role, I work with the University of Bridgeport in the Global Learning Initiatives team, and we support academic technology for the institution. Do you have suggestions of how I might vet apps if I'm standing up a CASA instance?
Yeah, so one of the first things you do when you bring up CASA, or you can choose to do, is define which sort of requirements you're going to place on apps. So there's a certain amount that you get when you receive an app through CASA. You can find out, does this app have explicit content? Or in the future, even more tightly, what are the content ratings for various things in here? Is it, maybe graphic violence or, bad language, or what are the aspects of it that would allow you to either say, yes, let me share it, or no, don't share it. Now, as far as receiving those attributes, when you've connected with another CASA instance, you've said, I trust this CASA instance to give me the right attributes. So there's that part of the process that's basically vetting by automation. It's automating that decision-making. But then, for example, in the CASA on Rails instance I showed, even after that, with that CASA on Rails implementation of CASA, that actually doesn't put the apps in the store right away. Instead, it actually loads them into the administrative interface and says they're disabled. And then you have to go in and manually still say enable it, which gives one more layer of vetting to make that final decision for you. As far as how we vet apps, I can share a little bit about what we did in the for the mobile space. When we would put apps in our mobile dashboard, we required certain things about what types of servers they were running on, the fact that they needed a technical 24/7 contact and administrative contact, those sorts of things. So there are other aspects of vetting that you could work in. But does that kind of answer your question, or did you have something else in mind?
No, that answers my question.
All right.
There are a couple questions in the chat. The first one was, what about schools that don't have nor will have their own app store?
All right. So the best way that you can get a tool that the person who wrote the tool doesn't have an app store, the best way you can get that tool in is you can find some app store that's willing to be the authority on it. So in that demo I had given earlier, there was another button that I didn't explore, but it's Submit App. So, we at UCLA will allow our community to submit apps that, hey, this app might be something that we'd be willing to share. So they can submit it. It doesn't get shared right away, but we go in, we can vet it, decide if it's something that we're willing to back, and then we can publish it out. In the same way, if it's a tool that says LTI certified, it's just as easily, it's just as easy for IMS to be that authority. But you do have to find an instance of CASA that's willing to share it. The other way you can do it, if you say a vendor really didn't want to implement all of CASA, but they did want to just publish out a bunch of apps, they could actually just write a JSON file that followed the rules. JSON is a JavaScript object notation. It's a pretty simple format, kind of like the XML, in case anyone's not familiar. But you could write a JSON file that just follows the rules of the protocol. And that static file actually can meet all the requirements that CASA has. So you can actually publish your apps out, not by running an app store, but just by writing an actual file of metadata and putting that on the web somewhere. I hope that answers that question.
The other question was, I'm interested in a rich rating system. FERPA impacts number of uses versus downloads, education segments in the modules
Yes.
are used in, and how does CASA tie in those types of reviews?
And that is one of the things that we'd love to flesh out during those biweekly calls about CASA, because that's one of the attributes that we haven't actually gone to talk yet, because we are, the people developing CASA at this point are a small enough group that we didn't want to try to make a broad sweeping decision without collecting all the right use cases. So one of the things that I didn't get into much during this talk is that CASA is built to be incredibly extensible. You can always add new attributes to CASA, really without any overhead or anything like that. So when I say defining attributes, this is one of those attributes that we'd love to, okay, so Steve, yeah, so Steve, we'd love to work with you and anybody else that's interested in being a part of this discussion on figuring out what is it we need to figure out how to embed in a rating system, and how can we do so in a way that, you know, we're getting all the telemetry out that you want.
Yeah, with the goal of avoiding as much what they call astroturfing as possible.
Yeah.
And that's one of the scenarios that's a bit disturbing, if you think about that, is a falsification of ratings by sort of the vendor, you know, the world at large, retailers or what have you. But you know, so it's one of the things. How do we put in place some safeguards that allows the ratings to be localized enough, but also use the power of the network? So. Let's see, okay, I see another question. Let's see, how does native and mobile apps get added, iOS and Android, to CASA? Aren't they always going to be in their particular app store? You actually have a thought on this, right?
Yes, okay, so there's no reason that you can't put something in more than one store. And a great example I'll give of that is Instructure's EDU App Center. They use that to share basically tools to their to all of their Canvas instances. But just as easily, they too are publishing via CASA and providing yet another dissemination medium. Now, when it comes to native apps, you think of native apps as being something different, but in reality, they're not really. They're just, you can reach them by going to a particular URL. So you can choose to publish your app via the App Store, like the Apple App Store, and you could simultaneously also choose to put it out via CASA. CASA does not say it has to be a web app. It can just as easily be a native app, and you can encode additional information into your CASA payload, the thing that describes the app. You can encode additional information to say this will only work on iOS, or this will only work on Android, and here are the parameters about it. So there's another question about, are there other resources available on how to integrate this stuff? So the answer is that is one of the things that we are currently working on developing. Along with making the protocol simpler and easier to understand, we are currently working on trying to figure out, what all these resources are that we need to provide and how to do so. Up to this point, it's mostly been through workshops given at the IMS quarterly meetings and through presentations like this one.
But one of the complicated things is that the LMSs do need to have that instance of LTI.
Yeah. So for the LMSs are an interesting case. Each LMS is responsible for implementing LTI. And so the way that we have written these reference implementations so far is that they actually can be launched as an LTI tool and then communicate back to the LMS which other tool the LMS should be adding in. To do that, though, they have to use a particular spec that's it's a message type for LTI. It's called content item. They need to actually implement content item. So if you're trying to if you wanted the easiest way to drop this into your LMS, the easiest way to drop this into your LMS is convince your LMS to support content item message type. And if you can get that support in the LMS, then you can literally just add it as an LTI tool and use that LTI tool to add other tools. So that's the easiest way to drop it into an LMS. You could also invest a little more resources and write it in such a way that it speaks the CASA protocol itself, the LMS that is, but I wouldn't recommend it. The much easier way would be to get content items supported.
Yeah, so content item is something that Stephen Vickers is working on, at least for some
Blackboard and Moodle
instances of the LMS.
And Canvas already supports something similar. They were the ones who had originally contributed the spec that turned into content item, so they just need to basically kind of update their implementation to match the actual content item message implementation. So that's three LMSs I know about. Lisa, do you know the status of any of the others, or the status even of one Stephen's working on?
No, those are the three that I'm aware of at this point. The spec is actually out. It's about to be finally approved, but I don't think there are any changes from the public draft that's been out for at least 6 months.
Great. Yeah. So let's see, did we, and I think we jumped off of the other questions kind of quickly to answer. So if anybody has follow-up questions. Happy to go over them.
That's looking like about it. So if there are no more questions, we can bring this session to a close. As we mentioned, there will be calls coming on a 2-week basis, and if you want notifications about the upcoming calls and you want to be put on the mailing list, there's the CASA mailing list link there, still on the screen. And at this point, I would like to thank Rose and Eric for basically doing the bulk of this presentation, a lot of good materials. I'd like to thank Lisa for facilitating the technology behind the actual webinar, and I'd like to thank all the participants for showing up. Please do visit that mailing list link, sign up for that, and do take a look at the draft protocol as well. And I thank everyone for their participation. Good afternoon.
Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.
Take care.